Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Boruto Manga chapter review. This one's going to be for chapter 15, which is called The Supporting Shadow. And overall, this is a very interesting, I suppose, end of the last small arc, seemingly transitioning us into much bigger things with what seems to be the introduction of our main villain group, at least for now, and the connections they're making to certain powers within the series. And I think that's definitely one of the bigger things within this chapter, in that it really starts to bring together a lot of the little things presented in Boruto, the manga overall, plus obviously the little bits and pieces we have from the anime as well. So I suppose we'll get the more mundane stuff out of the way, the result of what happened with Shojoji and stuff like that. So we thought that the fight was completely over last time out, Boruto defeating Shojoji with his special vanishing Rasengan. But Shojoji gets back up, and it seems like Boruto's just going to immediately hit him again with the same attack and take him down again. But what happens is that he has the Rasengan in his hand, but then basically what seems like his kind of chakra temporarily like turns off or something like that, and the mark on his hand, which we obviously know about and I'll get into much more later on, activates. And when he looks down at his hand, a close to full tattoo has kind of come over his hand, and he obviously can't quite seem to use chakra with it or something like that. He's not used to what it's doing, and it distracts him. He is saved by the arrival of Sarada and Mitsuki, who together basically, end up defeating Shojoji for good. And, we get just the fact that they abandoned the initial mission they were sent on to come and help Boruto, and he's going to have to make it up to them for the help that they've given him. And yeah, we basically just get the wrap up of this whole little arc with Tanto, with the daimyo, the fire, the land of fire, being really thankful for Team Konohamaru for not just saving Tanto, but kind of helping him to become a better person, and that you can definitely sense that the feudal lord is very happy to see that his son has kind of learned this lesson of, I suppose, moving from being that kind of spoiled brat character almost to now knowing the meaning of hard work and kind of having a goal to strive for, and not just throwing money at any sort of problems. So I think that's actually a pretty decent little character arc for Tanto. I assume we will see him again. I don't think he'll be like an extremely important character going forward, but at the very least, he is a friend that Boruto has, who is a connection to someone very powerful within the world. And I think that's an interesting dynamic, and depending on where exactly they're going with Tanto, they could always do something very unique when they do bring him back. Yeah, the aftermath of this is obviously that they finally reveal to us through the cards, basically, what the card Boruto was looking for was. But before that, we get a little bit of fun with it, of like Boruto buying another pack, trying to get the card he's looking for, because he gave back the card that Tanto gave to him, wanting to earn it himself. And Sarada's kind of like, well, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your money? And then Boruto's just like, you wouldn't understand, Sarada. And she gets really annoyed and buys a pack herself, and ends up getting the super secret rare Orochimaru card. And this is where they bring up the idea again that, like, this is like more or less one of their first times really finding out that Mitsuki's father is Orochimaru. In that, obviously, the end of the Boruto movie had this as the big reveal at the end. I think it cut away right before like we really got a proper reaction or discussion of it. But here it's brought up again in the fact that, like, oh, he keeps changing his faces all the time, but he tends to use that face a lot, and so on. It was just an interesting one that Sarada obviously knows who Orochimaru is, Boruto doesn't, and of course Mitsuki brings him up and is quite proud of him. So, fun little kind of moment there of just, of course, it had to be, the Uchiha character who pulled the Orochimaru card. But we then cut back to Tanto and see that, he's basically, as he's putting the card that he gave to Boruto and now has back into his binder, he kind of reflects on like his meeting with Boruto all of this time, and is just like, Boruto, I think you will get to that point and your goal of what you want to be, to support, who you want to support, because Tanto said that what he wants to do is eventually grow up to the point where he can support his father in his father's role as daimyo, the Land of Fire. And then it's revealed that the card that Boruto was after was, of course, the Sasuke card. But the important thing is, I suppose, the name of the card and the time period, I suppose, of Sasuke that this is. It is basically as current as possible Sasuke, and it's called the Supporting Shadow, Sasuke Uchiha card. So I think it worked, even though I thought it was quite obvious that this was what it was going to be. Just that the card was literally called the Supporting Shadow, that Sasuke currently, as he is right now, is known as, like, the main ninja who supports Naruto as Hokage, which is exactly what Boruto wants to be to Sarada in terms of their dynamic. And I like that. The only thing is just that the card, the picture of Sasuke on that card clearly showed his Rinnegan. I always thought it was like a thing within the Leaf Village now, that it wasn't really meant to be this really widely known thing around the world that Sasuke has the Rinnegan. So it's kind of weird that, like, it's allowed for a picture of him and his Rinnegan to just be on, like, what is effectively established to be the most popular trading card game in this fictional universe. In that, like, maybe I'm overreading this, but I thought that was a huge plot point in the recent Sasuke novel that came out in English not too long ago, that he, at that point, at least in his journey, is staying completely away from the village because the Rinnegan is guiding a lot of people back to the Leaf Village to find him, and the Rinnegan is part of why he kind of has to stay away from the village, and why it's, for the most part, they try and keep it a secret that he has it. So again, it was just a little weird thing. I suppose it's just they didn't really think it through in terms of, like, oh, do we have to hide it or not? Because I think the card would have had the exact same impact if you just, like, flipped it around and just had, like, his Sharingan maybe active at the time and get that across. But it is what it is. It's fine. Maybe now that he's much older and is known as supporting the village and is known as being, like, so crazy powerful with Naruto, that it's not as needed to be protected as a thing anymore. But it is what it is. So yeah, we can get into the rest of the stuff, and basically we see that, like, Sai, Ibiki, and then Sasuke come in to interrogate Shojoji afterwards because he's been captured. And Sasuke immediately wants to know what Shojoji knows about the tattoo, the seal, the mark on Boruto's arm, basically. Because during the fight, Shojoji noted that, like, Boruto, like, that tattoo, like, are you part of that organization? And so it was a really interesting just kind of reveal of just, like, oh, like, they're really setting up something, like this tattoo means more than just, like, a special power that Boruto happens to have. And then Sasuke, of course, comes in, and he's keeping tight-lipped around Sai. A fun little moment of just, for the first time, I think, Sai being referred to as Sai Yamanaka. So just, the little thing of just, like, of course they're married, but he took Ino's kind of family name because obviously he isn't aware really of what his family name is. I thought that was just a nice little touch to get, even though it wasn't, like, presented as being massively important. But immediately Sasuke gets him talking because it's Sasuke, and just the idea of, like, I can use any genjutsu possible on you here, just tell me what I want to know. And the result is basically just that Shojoji found out about this organization by kind of accidentally stumbling across a meeting that they were having and roughly hearing what they were talking about. And all he heard was that they were effectively called, was it Kara? I think is the kind of the Japanese terminology given. And it, like, means, like, shell or husk, I think is what most people are translating it as. And this is our organization. We see at the very end of the chapter, as well as a little bit in the middle, them looking at pictures of different tattoo kind of markings. And if you go back to chapter 1 of Boruto, you can see that the markings are, one of them matches Boruto's tattoo, and one of them matches Kawaki's tattoo, the person that Boruto's fighting in the first chapter, in the flash forward thing. And then there's a bunch of other different ones as well. In addition to them having, of course, the little diamond mark that is the base form of the tattoo on his hand. So they are clearly an organization that are based around, I suppose, to some degree, knowledge of what this stuff is and these tattoos are. And at the end, we see them all as a group together. They kind of wear masks, and the masks have the mark on it. Plus, potentially, it's implied that they themselves maybe have these marks also. Now, I think it's important to, at this point, I suppose, recap a lot of what we know so far about the tattoo markings, which most of it comes from either Chapter 1 of Boruto or Chapter 10 of Boruto. So the Chapter 1 stuff is obviously the very first kind of couple of pages, in that you can see here Kawaki's marking, you can see quite clearly there, which is the exact same as one of the ones on the wall. And then Boruto's one, where is it most clearly seen? Yeah, you can see Boruto's marking really clear there. As well as the eye power as well, which links into the Chapter 10 stuff. But just the tattoos, they have both of these two characters' markings. Now, Chapter 10 revealed to us that effectively, at least the explanation for Boruto is that the reason he has this marking is because he defeated a god. He killed an Otsutsuki member who, I don't know if they're just kind of trying to say that like Otsutsukis in general are considered gods, or that an Otsutsuki who has kind of got to a certain power level by just ingesting other Otsutsukis or chakra fruit or whatever are considered gods. I take it, if they're going to make this tattoo power a bigger thing, that it kind of has to just be Otsutsuki members, that if you kill one, you develop this power, because Otsutsukis are fundamentally like aliens, and they have a base power that is not just chakra related, in that like Kaguya, prior to the whole chakra stuff, actually had a special power. So they are just, in general, a species of being that have a power just at a base level. And so, a human defeating them, they're given some sort of a power. That's quite interesting, because that's the explanation given, that like Momoshiki, the spirit of Momoshiki, says to Boruto that, son of man, like, because you have now like defeated a god, you are no longer like an ordinary person. And he kind of says that he makes note of the fact that Boruto obviously has the blood of someone with the Byakugan, his mother's Hinata, in his veins, and also that his blue eyes will ultimately lead to like destruction of everyone around him, which is obviously potentially some sort of a reference to the fact that he has that special eye jutsu power of the ocular jutsu, I suppose is the technical term, dojutsu, which we pretty much know is called the Jogan, or Yogan, however you want to pronounce it, pure eye, which has been just fairly recently been like revealed, some of the extent of the power of it. But right now, currently in Boruto, at least in the manga stuff, we've never really got any mention of Boruto's Jogan, apart from the Chapter 10 stuff of Momoshiki mentioning it, plus the first chapter, him obviously activating the ability. So I think that's an interesting one, in that are they trying to say that like your eye power will ultimately hurt people or destroy people around you? And why does Boruto obviously have this amazing eye power, plus now this new tattoo power? There's a lot of, I think, really interesting things coming into play now, for sure, in that this group may come after Boruto just because they know he has this kind of tattoo thing, this mark, seal, as they seem to be referring to it as here. And Sasuke is obviously investigating it as well. So I'm very intrigued as to where they go with this, plus when they start to reintroduce Boruto's eye power back into play, because they basically said at the end of the last arc, when he used it, that it hasn't like activated again. It doesn't seem like it's in the anime right now activating anymore, and clearly there's no sign of it being active in the Boruto movie, or for the most part any time in the past while it hasn't really been shown to be active. So something probably has to happen with Boruto that activates his eye power, and I think it means that for sure we may start to get our first proper like information about how exactly the new seal kind of tattoo thing works for Boruto. And then of course we're always waiting for the introduction of Kawaki as a character into things, depending on how they do that. I suppose if the group turns out to be all members who have the tattoo power, are they going to explain that you can get it in different ways, or that you have to have killed an Otsutsuki, which becomes a problem because we don't know that many Otsutsukis, and suddenly revealing that, oh yeah, there's all these other characters who have killed Otsutsukis as well. It's just kind of like, huh? So I think there kind of has to be much more of an explanation about that, in that they either have to say that Boruto's seal is special because he happened to like kill someone to unlock it, versus other people like getting it in different ways, and then why, when it activated, did it like turn off his like chakra temporarily, and then like he says it's not like numb anymore or something like that when it kind of activates or deactivates. So there's a few pretty interesting things still to come out with regards to like the technicalities of how exactly it's working. But yeah, it's nice to finally know, I suppose, an idea about where we're going. That the text on like the last page seems to be hinting that we're moving into much more of a kind of big action, like villain focused arc going forward, which I hope they get straight into. I as I said, I hope they're a bit more open with the information, so we kind of have an idea about what's going on. But this as a chapter that's kind of just given more context to a lot of stuff we know already, I think has definitely been a success. I still ultimately would say like the chapter didn't cover as much ground as I expected it to, because there is still a lot of like, oh, I think we spent a little bit too much time with the fight with Shojoji that we didn't really need to. We spent a little bit too much time on the card game stuff before we cut to the interrogation of Shojoji, and stuff like that. It feels like a month's worth of content we would have got much more if it was weekly. Just that problem still continues to persist, I think, with the monthly manga so far. But overall, solid chapter, definitely better than some of the more recent ones. But I think it's one of those ones where it's like, this is good because of what it suggests going forward, and if they can get that stuff going forward right, the series is definitely going to become more and more interesting and popular. But yeah, that's been my thoughts on Boruto Chapter 15. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the chapter, as well as what I had to say here in the video. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye!